touch a lot of the east side of the valley as well, from Sanger out, and then also go into Terabella. The reason I'm saying that is my district touches pretty much every single water district, Fresno County down except for one in the valley. So I have from west side to exchange contractors to Bryant contractors to state contractors. I've got everybody. And so water being the #1 issue facing the valley, I'm in the toughest position because I've got to try to balance everybody's interests when most members of Congress only have a few to worry about, and it's a little bit easier to be in that type of position. In my 2 years, well, year and a half, 2 years now, being in Congress, I've had the honor of representing this district, but one of the issues I spent the most time on is obviously water. And I understand Congressman Nunes was here a few months ago, so I hope I don't repeat much that he said. But we did pass a bill, 3964, which was a lot like his 1837 that he had passed before I was a member of Congress. The bill was passed out of the House of Representatives back in February. The bill was not heard in the Senate, but it is sitting there in the Senate. And our senators decided to take a different route, and they passed their legislation out of the Senate. They did it a few months ago. Well, longer than a few months ago now. And so where does that put us today? Being that water is important to all of us, we would hope that the legislation will move forward. Legislation today, we are both negotiating, we're working with each other, and I can honestly say that my relationship with Senator Feinstein has actually been really good. Conversations are going really well. Congressman Costa's in the room, Congressman Farr is in the room, and others are on the Republican side as well. Senator Boxer and staff, everybody is working really well together. I'd like to say that my bill is the one's going to make it into law, but in all honesty, that's never going to happen. My bill covers a lot more, and it's got more of a long-term impact because it also includes storage. It takes into account what's going on in the San Joaquin River. It also takes in a different approach than Senator Feinstein's on the Delta. Mine would bring more water to the valley, and it also has a component in there that addresses the largemouth bass, the striped bass, the invasive species that are in the Delta that are actually having an impact on the smelt. Mine also has a few things that go in there to protect area of origin water rights, and also New Malone is down. It allows storage in there for, because I don't know if you've heard earlier this year, there were farmers that were storing water in reservoirs, there were groups that were storing water in reservoirs. We want to make sure they have the ability to do so, and so my bill allowed that New Malone. So there's a large component there that covers a lot of different things. Senator Feinstein's a little bit different. There's a big role in there that, or a line at the end that says when the drought declaration is over, according to the governor, that most of her bill would go away. And for me, that's not enough. We want to make sure that if the bill is good enough to get us out of this mess, it should be good enough to prevent us from the next mess. And so that's one of the things that we reached out to Feinstein about. We've reached out on a few different fronts. As far as the pumping, mine puts what we call a Bay Delta Accord in place to replace or to satisfy the requirements of the Endangered Species Act. So it would allow more pumping. Hers would just make some changes on the flows and the way the gates work in there to make sure that we're allowed to pump a little more water. As far as how far are we to do it, I actually think we've got a good shot of getting something done soon. My goal as far as timeline, get it done way before we get to before we see any rain and miss an opportunity to store more water. We all know that we're in a drought, and when there's a drought, we can't make it rain. But what we can do is when it does rain, we can capture that rain and store it and use it for us, and not allow that water just to go out to the ocean. And that's what my ultimate goal is. It is a slow process, though, as many of you know. We were able to move my bill off the House floor within 2 weeks of introducing it. It took a little bit longer on the Senate side, and I have the full support of leadership, especially now that the majority leaders from the Valley is suffering just like I am and my district is, so that makes it much easier to get it done. Senate, not as much, but the opportunity is still there. Immigration, and the Chamber's been a huge friend on immigration. Immigration's been a tough issue because we've struggled to get enough support to get it done. And now we see the President is talking about executive orders. Executive orders, in my opinion, is not the way to go for a lot of different reasons. If you're truly sincere about helping people with immigration reform, you want to do something that's long-term, you want to do something that works, and you want to create a system that gives people the opportunities that America provides. something like an executive order, the next president could literally just wipe it out, get rid of it. And so if you can imagine someone that's looking for an opportunity to become a citizen, to be able to go back to their home country, be a guest worker, come here to under a visa program. None of those things work under a visa, under an executive order. And so it's a dangerous place to go. But what happens is that it has to get done, and the House is struggling with that because there aren't enough votes there. And why aren't there enough votes there? I don't think enough members understand the issue. We had members that before, at the beginning of the conversation, thought that everything that was out there proposed was amnesty, and we all know it's not. After talking to them, we got a few that actually jumped on and voted the right way on a lot of different bills throughout the process in the last few weeks, and I think that's because some of us took the time to talk to them. But groups like the Chamber going out in Washington and spending a lot of time talking to members has really been helpful, but it's still not going to be an easy situation. I mean, the president, when he came into office in the first term, had both majorities in both houses. He was able to pass the Affordable Care Act. He wasn't able to get immigration reform done because they didn't have the votes then, and we're struggling to get the votes now with Republican control in one house. I still believe that it's possible to get done. The House is taking the position of a step-by-step approach, which makes sense in some ways because you want to take this slow, you want to make sure you do it right, you want to have an open and transparent process so that when we pass legislation, it's good for Americans that are here, it protects American workers, but at the same time make sure that we have a process that allows people to come in and be part of our society. And as a son of immigrants, that's one thing a lot of people don't understand the value of. My parents came from a country that, very socialist-leaning country. My dad was the youngest of 8 children, and he watches older brothers work and never get anywhere in life because the government controlled their lives. My dad came to this country in his mid-20s as a single man, and within a few years owned his own business. And not too long after that, us kids were part of that business. We've had lots of opportunities in this country because of the freedoms that we have here. And when you think about that, I know a lot of you know immigrants that have come to this country and they appreciate the opportunity. And people even talk, if you even talk to just random taxi drivers in some of our large cities and talk about their experiences at home and how lucky we are to live in this country, it's one of the best arguments we have to have a good immigration system because it reminds Americans of how good we've got it here and how we should respect and love this country and continue to support it and build it to what it is and what it was when our founding fathers started it. And so I'll always fight for immigration reform to be done right. But this system that this route the president seems to be taking, which I don't know if he will, I don't know if it's going to be a benefit to him, especially with the elections coming up. I know there's a lot of senators in red seats that are really nervous about the games that he's playing right now with something so serious. So we'll continue to fight. I do believe the opportunity is there. I do believe that we will come around and get enough members to vote or to have a process to move forward. But it's just going to be a slow process, and we'll have to rely on folks like yourselves to make sure you talk to your members of Congress and chambers around the country to talk to their members because for the most part, I think the ballot here is pretty unified that we want to get something done. So what's next? We've been home for about a month here working in the district. I've been up and down the district, and I can give you an update on what we've been doing, or what I've been doing around the district. I can even tell you about the kids starting soccer because we haven't been in Washington for the last month. But we're going back on Monday, and so we've got 2 weeks. Monday we start, and we'll be there for the next 2 weeks working. And there's a group of stack of bills that we're going to run through and push through that I think most of you should find interesting. But we're going to get a bunch of bills packaged together, and it's for jobs and the economic growth of our country and the things that you should be interested in. HR 367, that's the REINS Act. It's a bill that just makes a lot of sense when we talk about government agencies that implement rules, and members of Congress don't have a say in it because we give broad authority to a lot of different agencies. Well, the REINS Act is something that if a new rule is implemented, members of Congress have to vote on it, especially a major rule that has a huge impact on any type of business. Now think about that. How many times have you seen an agency create a rule and you come to us and beg us to fight and to stop and to control this and not allow this agency to go crazy and destroy our businesses? Well, now if this bill passes and gets signed into law, I will be responsible. I, as your representative, will have that vote. And so when I come back to my district, I'll have to answer to you for what I've done on that. And it's a good safety mechanism because it allows us to be responsible for the actions of government as your representatives of government. I think it's a good common sense bill. And that's something that will be coming up the next week. I've got a list of it, so I'll go really quick. We've got 4438, which makes the R&D tax credit permanent. That's a bill that'll be coming up next, or coming up real soon. That's something for a lot of our innovative companies here in the Valley, especially with the present state investing in water technologies, and we're always trying new things here in the Valley. We're always looking for new opportunities. This is something that helps incentivize that with R&D tax credit, and even things like pivots, which are kind of new here in the Valley. And I happen to be one of the guys here in the Valley that are installing a pivot on my farm. That's one of those big wheels that irrigate your crops. We'll be doing something probably by the end of the year, and we're looking at about 230 acres with that. And that's not something we give tax credit because it's not new technology in the U.S., so that's not a personal thing there. 4457, that's another bill, Section 179, obviously for those who are making investments in their business. And I know I hear a lot about Section 179 and making sure that tax credit is there for those who are investing in their business, buying a new piece of equipment. That's something that we've always fought over, and that's a bill that we're pushing forward again to make sure that it gets signed into law. So those of you who are making investments in your business can write that off and hopefully incentivize more so we can create more jobs. It's a huge win for us. We've also got one that a lot of people don't give a lot of credit here in this area to be a benefit to us. Keystone Pipeline. Why is Keystone Pipeline important to us here? We get into a little debate about energy and transporting, but we do have a lot of companies who rely on rail. Rail is important to us. And there are a lot of trains around the country that are tied up right now transporting oil. And Keystone Pipeline, I think in a lot of ways, will free up rail and give us more opportunity here. I stop getting calls from some of my companies here who are having issues with backed up trains or having trouble finding train cars. So that's something that would actually benefit us. There's one that's pretty interesting as well that will be passed, 2728. That bill, when we talk about fracking and we talk about regulation, so many times we have industries that complain about over-regulation because they have to jump through two hoops. They've got the federal government, they've got the state government, they've got to hire consultants, hire engineers, hire different folks and help them get through the process. And they've got to do everything twice, and sometimes it's tweaked, sometimes it works for that same report will work for one guy, one agency, but not the other. Well, that one basically says if the state's doing a good job regulating their fracking industry, the federal government backs off. But for the states that aren't, the federal government will step in. And I think that's a reasonable approach because we're not spending a lot of resources on agencies regulating and double regulating industries. And so it's something that actually has a benefit for us. Another one, as a farmer and someone here that and you drive around the valley and you see all these different canals. Some canals are owned by water districts, some are actually owned by farmers, and sometimes it's just regular old puddles. But something that we have a lot of issues with is the EPA over-regulating with navigable waters. We've got a bill now that will be coming up, 5078, that will pull back on that. It'll stop the EPA's overreach on this regulatory process. And that bill should be coming up soon as well. Then we've got a few on accountability as well, things with the IRS. Obviously, the IRS has been an issue. You've got issues with the VA. The head of the VA has now stepped down, which is good, but think about that. One person at the top of a huge agency like that, does that one person make that big of a difference? Or do we need to find ways to make sure that the people that the new chairman takes over, the new head of the VA, will he be able to fire the guys under him that we're doing a bad job, that we're pushing policies in different agencies? Well, this bill, 5169, will have an impact on that, and will make it a little bit easier to get rid of those guys so these agencies can run better. And I think that's a good common sense reform. But those are all bills that were coming out. There are more. I would bore you with all of them, but there's a lot of them out there. And we're working. We're going to get those through. If you look through, and the president's been pretty harsh on Congress, but we've passed 500 some bills. There's about 350 sitting on the Senate now. We've actually had more amendments offered by one Democrat in the House than every single Republican in the Senate on appropriations bills. Think about that. We've had way, way more transparent process. We have more amendments to appropriations bills offered by one single person than every single Republican on House appropriations or on appropriations bills through the two houses. We've done our job. We continue to do our job. We continue to pass legislation. We've got to get the Senate to act. We've got to get them to start taking some of these bills and putting them on the president's desk. They'll never do anything more than just be a piece of paper with a number on it until there's a signature on it from the president. And the Senate has to allow these bills to move forward so that we can help you guys be successful and great jobs. So I'm going to end with that and open up for questions. I know there's a ton of you in here. And yes, sir.
Water storage for ag. You talked about EPA, and of course the Army Corps of Engineers are probably involved in terms as well. Is there anything during this drought that we can do, or you can help us do to kind of protect us from the overreach of the EPA or Army Corps or U.S. Fish and Wildlife when there's water storage for ag?
And to specific, the legislation that I introduced is something that would help make sure that we are able to store water in different reservoirs, and there's parts in there. But specifically, I don't know if I know specifically which case you're talking about, or just a really broad statement.
Well, it's a broad statement because the EPA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps, all reach into everything. It seems like they all, the net effect is that projects slow down or stop. So using the drought as a reason to try and move things forward or to accelerate, you would think that somebody could then coordinate those three agencies. Let's step aside for a while and let water storage become primary.
We would love for that to happen. We've actually pushed a lot. And Senator Feinstein has even worked with us on some letters to try to get opportunities to prevent water from going out. And there has been some action on that. But every time we've spoken with an agency, they always say they're following the letter of the law and they're doing the best they can. And that's been their answer every single time. So it's still going to have to go back to us changing the law we've got in place today. Right, yes, sir.
You mentioned the fracking thing about the state being able to sort of cover their own. And those that did well, left alone, those that didn't. Who would make the decision on who's doing good, who's doing bad?
Well, and that's part of the federal government's rule to make sure that we're just, in the bill, it has a language in there that helps separate that. But it is allowing the federal government to make that decision. Okay, they're doing their job, we'll step back. And usually states do a much better job of regulating because it is closer to the people. They understand how, everything is different in every different state. But usually allowing the state to play that role makes it a much more precise regulatory process because they know what they need to do, how the system works there locally, and the federal government, for the most part, is usually a little more lax and allows the states to just do their job. But it would be the federal government that would allow them to make that decision.
Said something though about the Russian thing, Ukraine, military.
There isn't a lot of talk about that. I don't sit on the foreign affairs, so it's not where I hear a lot about what's going on in Ukraine. I've been to some of the briefings. Most of the sense from the other members that I talk to is they're not looking forward to getting involved in any way, shape, or form. Most of the talk is around how are we going to find a way to make sure that we can help them with things like natural gas so they don't feel like Russia has such a strong role in their economy because natural gas obviously plays a huge role in their daily lives. But as far as actual military action type things, there's hardly any talk of that at all. It's mostly what can we do to free up their economy or free up their opportunities so they don't feel as connected or as under the gun of Russia is the one thing that I hear the most about. Yes.
Your favorite questions always come from me. But you look lonely up there. So I hear that there's a September deadline pending for a possible another government shutdown.
September 30th is the deal, but we're passing a continuing resolution. in the next few weeks to make sure that that gets us through to the next fiscal year. It's, again, it goes right back to the appropriation process. On appropriations, we pass bills and we fund the government. The House has acted, and I think we've gotten about 10 or 11 of them done out of committee, and 6 or 7 off the House floor over to the Senate. So we're more than halfway there, and the Senate has passed absolutely zero. None. Not a single one. And so we're working through the process, but it's really difficult for us to continue doing our work and watch the Senate do nothing. So the last resort now is continuing resolution, which as an appropriator is the thing that we hate more than anything, because you're just continuing the same budget as last year. But at least, if you look at what's happened over the last 5-6 years, they've had continuing resolution for every year for the last 5 or 6 years. They say about a third to just over a third of the members of Congress have never actually seen regular order where we pass our appropriations bills. And so last year, we finally got to a point where we passed an omnibus appropriations bill, which was all of them grouped together instead of the original 12. But at least we made some changes. We adjusted our priorities. We reduced spending in some programs and increased in others. But we did what we're supposed to do. You adjust the government spending to today's needs. And we've done that. And so we've got a new appropriations bill that was passed last year, and we're going to continue that one. So it'll be continued government as today, as is running today. And that's what they're going to do to get us through the next bill. And I don't think that'll be a tough lift at all. It'll just depend on the Senate. But again, the way it's supposed to work is appropriations bills pass, sign into law one by one, and go through the process, and the Senate has passed absolutely zero. They're not very, I don't know what they do. I mean, Harry Reid's on the floor just trashing the Koch brothers. I think that's his goal in life, and that's what he wants to do. Yes?
Someone is for Harry to turn that bills, once they get to the Senate, and he's someone that's blocking all of the bills.
There's probably 350 bills sitting there now, waiting. And they'll never be more than just a piece of paper until they make it through the Senate. And if they would at least send some of the bills back with the changes they want, I mean, go through a process, do something, but just allow them to sit there and do nothing is pretty useless.
So who's putting pressure on the
It'd be nice if the president would mention that once in a while instead of attacking us all the time. But I don't know if that's their goal. I don't know what their ultimate goal is on this. It should be an easy one, and we'll see what happens. Because if the Senate does change hands in the next election, and that's still a 50-50 shot, it's not like we'll have the 60 votes necessary to just push whatever we want. It would be at best case maybe 51, 52 votes, which isn't enough to do whatever you want in the Senate. You need the 60 vote, and that's why Harry Reid still needs some of the Republicans to get some bills through. But if we're able to do that and get some common sense bills on the floor of the Senate and get them passed, at least they'll make it to the president's desk and he'll have to take a position. And that's where our big fight is. Yes, sir.
Is there any new activity on high-speed rail front?
In Washington? No. Absolutely not. Anybody outside, and there is limited resources out there to pay for projects. Everybody's got a project in their home state and their home district. And to see a project that's gotten as much bad press and is as horribly run as this high-speed rail project is here in California, there's absolutely no way any member of Congress outside of California sees that as a priority, and they're willing to give up money that could do something good in their district to send it over here. And it's not a winning fight for them. Even some of the Democrats in California are struggling to support it. And after a lot of debate that we've had in some of our fights there on the floor, or even in committee, I've had a lot of Democrats come to me and say this project's been an absolute disaster. People who are supporters of it. And it's really a shame. Someone else have their hand up? Yes, sir.
David, talked about appropriation of water. Several months ago, I met with representatives from the Bureau of Reclamation. They showed us the environmental impact statement report for that. A lot of those plans, cameras flat, and we asked them. It sounded like they were ready to get pretty close to waiting for finalizing. And so I asked them, what's holding you up and said appropriations. Is there any money appropriated for
Right now, the best opportunity to bring money for a project like Temperance Flat or others is the water line. And
short of state?
there is need for money everywhere in the country. And we've already spent sent $3 billion over from the federal government for high-speed rail. That money should go to water storage. Every state has issues that they need money for. And water is one that I'd love to be able to bring some money for, and if there's an opportunity to do so, we will. But probably the best opportunity we have right now is the water bond with $2.7 billion that's in that to help them get started. Yes, sir.
Is anybody concerned in Washington about national debt, up to $18 billion?
Yes. And through the appropriations process, we've actually reduced spending in a lot of different departments. EPA, for example, we've reduced it by about 36%. There is a big chunk there that has to be looked at still today, but we're actually reducing spending as we speak. Some on the far right will say not enough, and some on the far left will say too much. And that tells me we're heading in the right direction. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.